This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. This is Matteo Rizzi, executive producer of the show. We are live from WebSummit. This is a special. I'm here with my good friend Didier Lallemand. Actually, you will be surprised. In the meantime, if you're not aware, he changed his role and is now CEO of Treezor, but also one of the pillars of SG Ventures. Didier, welcome back to Breaking Banks.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's my first Web Summit, so
wow,
very happy to be here with you.
So let's start from there, because it's actually my first Web Summit as well. You know,
okay.
What are the feelings of this huge event?
You said it, it's huge, beyond what I could imagine. So, you know, it's going to be very hard to make everything and go everywhere in even 3 days. And there's so many people here. The attendance at our booth was, you know, from this morning on, very, very heavy. So a lot of people to discuss with, a lot of people to meet. Great event, definitely.
Great. So I want to get it a little bit, personal here, in the sense that we don't have a lot of opportunities to talk with 30, say, good years, in a banking space, brought into the a venture capitalist investing, which is per se was already a big shift, and then another big shift now, heading a grown up like Treezor. Why don't you put things back in context? Tell us a little bit the history, how Treezor has been acquired, and how did you get into leading this SocGen company?
Well, actually, it's interesting because when I moved out of finance after my 30 years in banking into innovation and venture, it was exactly at the same time as when Societe Generale Group bought Treezor, beginning of 2019. So from my very beginning as SG Ventures, I was actually overseeing Treezor as one of the major investments done by Societe Generale Group. But I wouldn't say it was as an investor, it was a bit more than that because Societe Generale had taken the majority stake, but it was still, from quite a high level strategy, roadmap perspective, not on the ground. And we had our two founders, which were, managing the company as they were doing since 2016 when it was launched. And after 3 years of quite intense discussions, because Treezor, being leader in the BaaS, is one of the key milestones for Societe Generale development in the bank as a service, and that was the reason why we acquired it. So we had very interesting discussions on how should we scale Treezor, what was the strategy, and with Eric and Xavier, and after 3 years. Well, even though collaboration was great, and when we bought Treezor, it was 50 people. Now we're going to be more than 200 people in Treezor. So, all the roadmap that we had decided from the beginning in 2019 was really executing very well. But, they decided that they wanted to have other type of challenges.
Of course.
And so, that was beginning of May, I stepped in when they decided to retire. And so, since a bit more than 6 months now, I've been on the ground, CEO for Treezor.
So you saw the challenges, of Treezor being, I don't want to say integrated, but being part of the SocGen family, okay? And but you saw it from two different angles, right? So from the investor angle and now with the CEO angle. Share with us a little bit, what these challenges were, beside the obvious one, which is, a new company integrating a big corporation. Of course, there are mechanisms that, maybe at the beginning don't always talk, well together, but what else?
So So I would, take it from the two angles. From a strategic angle, which was my first one, discussing on how we should grow Treezor. There were really, opportunities to scale up Treezor in mostly two ways. One was adding to the Treezor offer, the core offer of Treezor as a bank of a service, additional capabilities coming from Societe Generale Group, namely credit, which is something Treezor cannot offer by itself. Of course, we have subsidiaries in the Societe Generale. So the development that was enriching the Treezor offer by adding components of Societe Generale was, very clear from the start, and it is executing very well. The second dimension that we had decided also that we would leverage Societe Generale on was internationalization. Treezor was born in France with French customers as a start, very successful. Natural path was to grow in Europe, and Societe Generale, was a good partner, having presence in pretty much all European countries to help Treezor grow in that direction. So that was the strategic. And, it was very clear. Now, when you move into the CEO shoes and you see the execution of the strategy, then, things are not different, but, you face challenges that you do not see when you're only talking about the strategy. So execution is, sometimes harder within a group like Societe Generale because you have to abide by a certain number of rules. And so, sometimes things can take a little bit longer than they would have taken in a pure startup environment. On the other side, we're also benefiting from synergies, even, synergies you would not necessarily think of. When you establish an office in Germany or in, you have to hire people with German contracts, you have to pay them, and so having HR people in Societe Generale Group knowing all that, it looks like a little bit thing, but it helps a lot. And of course, the business is of course paramount, which we have our friends from the global payment services that are established in all European countries, and so we are able to exactly replicate the offer that we have for Treezor in France, building it again in those countries where we will open local IBANs in Germany, Spain, and Italy. And this is only possible because, or it is mostly possible because we are helped by our friends from the Societe Generale Group.
So I think that your journey is specifically interesting in the, I want to say, people management, aspect of the job. I've got actually a couple of friends. I'm thinking right now of my friend Sergio Zocchi from United Ventures, who became the CEO of October. And October being one of the investees of the fund. And he was telling me, what the dynamics in managing people as a CEO versus the advisory part as an investor changes completely. I would love to have your sharing of experience on this.
That's, I think you summarized it quite well. As an investor or board member, in a way you're an advisor. You're helping shape the strategy, you're challenging the choices, you're bringing expertise, but you're not doing it. And when you become a CEO and you have to make decisions on the day-to-day, like 25 decisions per hour on all types of topics. I mentioned HR, compliance, risk, business, of course, IT, all those topics. As a CEO, you have, when it's necessary, to say the final word, decision, yes, no. And people look at you and they're looking for you to make decisions as quickly as possible because time runs fast, and you definitely have a view of, I'm not thinking of how can I help, I need how can we do. And so you're really part of the game. You're not on the side looking at it and helping. You're in the middle of the team, and that really changes the dynamics.
I was actually, if I may ask this question, because we know each other for a while, of course, you have a super strong a financial background, modeling. There's something that is, more than your daily bread for such a long time. And as we always say that in a grown-up, the CEO is always the first sales guy of the company, right? Mm-hmm. I wonder, and it's a genuine question that I have. How did you deal, with yourself putting in the shoes of a sales guy, or representing the company, but with a strong push, right? Because it's you're the first sales guy of the company, you're the face of it. How was it for you?
Well, I think the timing was also right because Treezor is a scale-up, and we all know that we're living times where the number of customers or clients is not the main metric anymore. Profitability, it doesn't have to be now or even next year, but it has to be on the horizon. And profitability, necessarily you need to manage risks, and you need to be able to measure what are the risks and your risk appetite, because the growth is very good in order to scale from 50 to 200 people or from 2 to 100 clients. But at one point, and especially when you're successful, you start to have to select your clients based on what is the common profitability that we can achieve together as partners in the next years. So having this mindset and this experience in risk management and finance, which is a way of doing it, helped me in helping the teams and the sales teams identify and maybe
the risk versus opportunity
exactly,
as
and
well,
qualify
right?
better risk and opportunities.
Actually, what you just said made me link to another question, which is, do you think that the fact that the Treezor is owned by a bank gives you a competitive advantage in maybe instead of going cold calling and say, hey guys, do you have a project we can work with? But those people find Treezor more attractive because they think there is the group behind that will actually make things smoother, or at least easier to reach?
I think it probably depends on who are our clients. Our two main client groups. On one side, the ones we started with, the fintechs, and we started with fintechs that don't even have clients yet because they're building their product with us and then go to market and find their clients. From a fintech perspective, Treezor is on its own big enough with the reputation of having launched, unicorns, so they don't have an issue with that. But we're also addressing corporates, big corporates, CAC 40 and FT, whatever. So for those, looking at a partner is quite a different way, and having a partner who is part of a huge group like Societe Generale is definitely a plus, because two ways. One, they know that we're here to stay. We have the backing of multi-billion group, so we do not depend on the next funding round. We're here part of a strategy. And the second thing is we invested a lot, thanks to being part of Societe Generale, in compliance. And for those corporate actors, having a partner that is compliance proof, banking grade compliance, is also definitely something very important. And I would add a third thing on top of compliance, which is cybersecurity. Again, here, being part of a huge group, it's mandatory that we invest in that field. And for our partners, and especially the corporates, it's very important.
How challenging is to keep, especially with large corporations, how challenging is to keep this agility, of a grown-up, because a startup will be too reductive, versus comply with the mom's rules, of the company. Can you navigate, and find a good compromise? How easy is to find this compromise?
I wouldn't say it's easy, and again, in discussions that we're having with corporates, we need to find a balance. Sometimes, some of them were looking at us saying, you guys, you're the fintech, you should adapt to us. So these are our specifications. Please, your API is fine, but please adapt your API to conform to our specification. Yeah. And then we have to tell them that, this is not the right way to do it, because if they want to leverage on our 100 plus clients and the mutualization that we achieve with that, they have to adapt to our API. So in the end, sometimes we find a middle ground, with a small interface in order to make sure that everyone's happy with it. But it's never easy. We have always to find a balance. When we're talking to fintechs, it's easier because we tell them, this is an API that has been successful with 100 clients, use it. When you're talking with a big corporate that has legacy systems, that has, all its history, it sometimes can be a little bit more challenging.
Last question, that one will make you think. So, name in this first half a day or 3/4 of the day, one conversation without specifying the client or the person or the title, but describe one conversation that sort of sticks today here at the Web Summit.
I think it was, a prospect, someone that came to our booth and asked me about, our ability to create virtual cards in order to solve, a payment problem. And it was a very interesting discussion. We were, quite, it was a short discussion, like 10, 15 minutes, but, digging very directly into what is your client's problem, what are you trying to achieve, and how can our, platform answer that. So, it's something that I very much like to do, and that our sales teams are, much better than I am, because they know the product, of course, much better than I do. But coming from, solving a customer problem and trying to see how we can help in that, it's always very refreshing.
I really like, Didier, the fact that you always, you never recuse yourself from putting yourself at play into a new game, right? So this is, since I've known you for like a couple of years, that's already the second time. So I salute, this courage to put yourself in the game every time with a new player. Thank you very much for being with us once more.
Thank you very much for having me.
And guys, this is a break. Thank you.
The FTS Group builds innovation ecosystems. We engage incumbents, investors, entrepreneurs, technology partners, and regulators to build trusted and connected fintech tribes around the world. We firmly believe that innovation in financial services will truly improve people's lives. Learn more on ftsgroup.eu.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is the Societe Take Over. I'm here with my dear friend Claire. Claire is the CIO of Societe Generale. She's overseeing the funds operation and much more, their corporate venture capital. And she's also one of the pioneer of the Web Summit. She's at participation number 7. Claire, welcome back to Breaking Banks.
Thank you, Matteo. I'm delighted to be there today.
So tell us a little bit, before we dive into what we want to talk about, which is going to be trends and specifically some of the high talked about themes of this Web Summit on the fintech space. Let's talk a little bit about your experience of these 7 years at Web Summit. Oh my God, was it really that small 7 years ago?
Yeah, it was much smaller. I remember, it was coming from Dublin, and they were looking for a bigger space. So they made an agreement for 10 years with Portugal to host in Lisbon Web Summit. And I think we can be very proud, because what I've been following over the 7 years is not all the stages are staying. And actually, MoneyConf have been there for 7 years, which means there is a high interest of participants, but also a high level of startups in Europe and of investors to maintain the stage. And I think, what I can say is I remember 7 years ago, and Boden was probably already on stage with me. And I remember Mike Laven from Currency Cloud. They were very small startups.
Yes.
And, now Currency Cloud was sold for 400 million or 800 million to Visa.
Yes.
And is obviously
Sterling is a
Sterling
multi-unicorn.
Is like a multi-unicorn. Remember Nick Storonsky, from
course.
Revolut. He was in the small stage of MoneyConf, and now he's like in the central stage, talking about how is it disrupting the industry. So I think not only Web Summit was small, but also the companies and the fintech were quite small. And now wow, what a journey it has been.
It is actually a great transition to the central themes of this conversation, which is, let's talk a little bit where the fintech industry is going. This morning, a TV channel from Italy woke me up at 8 a.m. in the morning because it was 9 for them, and they asked me abruptly, with my coffee, what are the fintech trends, and
you answered Web3.
Exactly, and I said Web3, of course, and I said no, more seriously, to me Web3 is more like a fear of missing out. It was more like in my humble opinion, I said financial health. 2 words is financial inclusion in developed markets, because people today are not good in dealing with their money. Not only the mass affluent, but especially the middle to lower class, especially with this inflation that is rising. There will be more and more people in need for financial education. So this is, to me, one trend. What would you say?
And this topic is very close to my heart, because one of the reasons I choose financial services to implement digital is because digital enable everyone to have access to a more sophisticated way to save money, to build your wealth, which traditionally was more only accessible for people that can have a private banker, that can do this type of thing. So I think financial wealth in developed countries is definitely still at the top of the agenda. And when we enter such a difficult economic context with inflation and everything, I think more than ever, it's the role of banks to really be close to our customers and to see how can they save. I remember when I was living in the UK, the stat was 50% of the population don't fully understand what means 50%. And we worked a lot with Martin and Fox and what she was doing for Digital Everyone. And we were seeing that if people understood how can they harness digital, they can save up to £427 a month, I think, a year, which means a lot.
Of course.
For things. So I think this is still much center. And when I've been at Societe Generale for 4 years, I remember at the beginning we were selling between 1 to 5% online products, and today, in average, countrywide, all over, we have several banks in France, but also Africa, Czech Republic, Romania. I think the average is around 28%. So we are seeing more and more consumer harnessing digital. And it's very important that they understand what type of products they are buying, how can they subscribe this product. And in our online bank Boursorama, for example, we are enabling our customers to have a type of online private banking, robo-advisor type of things, and etc., which enables them to really build capital and do this type of thing. So it's still there, and it needs to be done digitally, but also through the branches and through the conversation with the banker in some situation. And COVID have helped a little bit, because now also video conference is available, so your traditional banker is also more accessible.
And I have a direct question on this, on a specific trend, for 2 reasons. One, because it's very polarizing, and of course it's going to be like your personal opinion as much as it could be. So we won't take like the Societe Generale generic view on this for what you're about to say, but the buy now pay later trend. Okay, I think that in the past 2 months, 3 different journalists interviewed me about this. I don't know why, because it's a super cool acronym and everyone thinks it's a trend, but there are a lot of people who think it's just another form of credit, So what's your take on this?
I guess people are asking a lot about BNPL, because the valorization of Klarna going from what was it, like
I think 80
million
to 60
7 billion.
Exactly.
Now it's 7 billion,
yes.
Because some funds enter that 7 billion and say probably it's a good deal. So I think that probably raised some question around how was the capital invested in this area of BNPL, and why such a compression, which probably 60-70% downgrade in valuation. I guess our take on it at Societe Generale is we've been a strong advocate of the bank as a service since the beginning. We invested in Treezor, which is a bank as a service platform, and this year we bought PayExpert, which is a payment gateway platform. And our vision is, by using the payment gateway, we can use our payment and consumer credit arm to, at the moment of checkout and point of sales, provide credit. But the reality is, for us, long-term credit is really the things to go after. So short-term credit could be a go-between to gather more data in the system at the payment gateway level. And the way ADN or Stripe works is they sell this data to the e-commerce. So aggregated data, it's the individual data, but they sell the aggregated data in order to convert the sale to the e-commerce client. So it became a real business to do that, and they are happy to do short-term credit such as BNPL in order to make it more accessible, to make sure the sale is converted. So I think that's around this e-commerce trend. We should never forget e-commerce is 1,000 billion by 2030. So 1,000 billion by 2030. So if you think bank can take like Societe Generale can take 1% of it, right? Still a lot, and BNPL is one part of that. So.
But the way you're saying it is actually another pair of shoes, because it's like really a service that is embedded in a philosophy of user experience where credit is part of it. This I like it. But in some other countries, especially in say Africa, when BNPL became a trend as well, it is very dangerous to give credit to someone you have such little data about, and people becomes over-indebted, and it becomes a dangerous weapon. Actually, is literally a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it gives you more opportunity economically, but on the other hand, it becomes a danger for the person, to get in a spiral that becomes very complicated. So it goes together with the financial literacy, point that you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah, but also your point is sometimes trends are there. You and I have been working a long time together, and we see some trends in some markets that are not applicable in other markets. So, you work in Latin Africa, we have some banks in Africa. What I can observe is the way even the saving system is done don't work the same. They have this name, for the cagnotte, for the wallet they are doing with the family.
The Roscas,
The Rosca, exactly.
Yes.
So, their philosophy is more around the Rosca, and, how can I see a lot of startups that are trying to address these needs through a digital channel, which are probably a stronger business model in Africa than BNPL, that, as you mentioned, don't have necessarily have data. So I think, and you and I have seen that. I remember when there was a lot of crowdfunding platforms that were inundating Europe, and what they all morphed to lending and
absolutely,
to do
they all pivoted by magic, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, it's exactly the same. I hope I guess the BNPL trail, if it's taking up in Africa, will quickly move to Rosco, because that's the consumer usage and the consumer all drives adoption.
Claire, you mentioned the down round of Klarna is not the only one, and let's sort of put on for a moment your hat of venture capitalist, okay? And how did you see in the past, I want to say year almost, and through the pandemic as well, the change in valuation, perspective, type of startups that get funded, number of pitches that you get.
Yeah, sure.
It's been like a mess, right? A little bit.
Yeah, like we were, it was like a storm in a teacup.
Yeah.
It was like we all knew, at one point, readjustment needed to happen. But also I think we need to be very pragmatic around the numbers. So for me, when I think about downturn in valuation and etc., what the data is telling us, there is three types of case. There are the ones that are listed, the fintech listed, are mostly in the US. There is not so much in Europe, in Wise or Cobalt.
Maybe Wise, exactly.
But, there is not so much. Most of them are in the US, Lemonade, Affirm, all this type of firm. And when we look at their data for listed company, yes, there was a readjustment at about 50% of their valuation. Plus, we've seen some layoff in the US with business models like Robinhood or others that are.
But you could say so was Microsoft, right? They
exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's a global trend in the macroeconomic environment, in tech and etc. But it's impacted listed fintech company if we look at the data. In Europe, it's not so clear, because what happened is you have companies like Stripe or Klarna that have readjusted. So Stripe was about 38% readjustment. Klarna, we mentioned 60 to 70% readjustment. But on the other, we don't have so many data. So they raised a lot of money, and there was no market event or trigger that needed for them to go out to say, I'm readjusting. So people are leaving the leash of this environment to say, well, I have cash, and I'm going to see. And I focus a little bit more, and investors are focusing a little bit more on revenues and etc. and on burn rate.
So if they've been hit, we don't know it yet, you're saying?
We don't know it. So the data, at least, it's, we can have opinions, but the data, the track record and the facts are not giving us any information about that. Then when I look at equity and debt, if we look a little bit around that, equity last year in fintech, we are raising worldwide 30 billion per quarter. 30 billion is huge. It's like there is so many margins or so much business model. This year, Q1 was 30 billion, Q2 was 20 billion. We're waiting for the Q3 result. So what I always say is, look at the amount of money that is still in the system for VC and for fintech and for fintech overall. I mean, seriously, still huge area. And if there is readjustment, maybe there is a good reason for it. Maybe some deals were too high, and actually it's probably to some extent a good thing that the readjustment is there. But we are seeing people are still, from the number I just told you, people are still investing in our fund, Societe Generale Ventures. We did 4 deals this year, plus we acquired Pexperts, so mostly in ESG. We had Eco3, Intelligent Impact, which are ESG type play to build a financial product in ESG. So for me, for things that are probably quieter than a traditional VC, the pipeline was still very strong. When we look at the debt side, so what we do from the banking perspective, we still lend the same amount of debt to our clients. But what we do is we finance projects. We don't finance towards a bridge to your next round.
Yep.
And that's quite important. When you come, it's about financing projects that have a business plan, a rentability point, where we all believe it's there. And we are quite present in France. The States also, with the French bank BPI France, distribute a lot of products that are supporting the growth in a very complicated microeconomics that is coming, and Societe Generale distributes all these financial products. So what I'm saying is, in the debt side, there is still a lot of traditional debt that is there on 3 to 5% interest, and we don't distribute this type of product, venture loan, which are more around 7 to 9% that exist, which are more done by funds and this type of capability. So, liquidity is still there on the market. After, what everyone is asking is how can we access the dry powder, because we know, the amount has been raised. Yeah. So when the growth equity in Europe is going to materialize, is going to be there, what are going to be the condition? Realistically, what we hear from funders is, well, for sure, next year is going to be interesting in terms of that.
So, do you think that because of this, I want to say, delicate phase of some of the grown-ups, that are either, getting short in capital soon or not yet knowing, whether or not, they are in a good health or not, do you think that there will be some bargains and the number of acquisitions will actually grow rather than the investments from big players to, for example, an American player coming to Europe, instead of just opening up, their business? Do you think there will be some sales in Europe soon?
So there is two parts to your question. What we are seeing as a trend is Americans or people that are not in Europe actually more seeing in the press, we are not going forward with our European plan. So Marcus have announced that they are focusing back on wealth, probably not doing fully the expansion of Europe. A bit the same for several projects. Starling have said that they renounced to their expansion in Europe through the traditional banking account, and they will come with the bank as a service area. So not observing these trends that people say it's a good opportunity to do that. Then, to your second point, M&A is very active. Transaction on M&A is very active, and yes, there will be consolidation for the ones that are well funded in order to, reach this point of better rentability, because people need that. One of the competitors of Treezor, Solaris, obviously, when they did the acquisition of the Wirecard portfolio, directly integrated a strong part of revenue when bank as a service aspect could continue to grow. So I expect to see several of these type of M&A in Europe. After, the challenge in Europe remains the same, and that's why I'm so glad that we have WebSummit in Europe, is Americans, and I think the American funds have very well understood that. They arrived with American valuation, American way to price. And the experience now that we are hearing from the American fund 2 years in from this strategy is actually a little bit of adjustment on, okay, actually we price company at the maximum of the valuation in the country of origin, and then we add ARR they can have in sub-countries. So the mechanism around creating giants beyond unicorn have yet to be fully unplugged, because Europe remain a more fraction market that you can find in the US. And I think that's the type of thing we are doing at WebSummit when we have so many American investors that came back after the COVID, that we have so many brains that are coming around to talk about policies, so many governments that are coming around to support technology. Because let's face it, our two main challenges in life remain the same, remain the climate challenge and everything that will go around that, and how can we harness technology in our everyday life to fight for climate change, but also to fight for making it better, going back to your financial aspect.
Claire, this is the last interview. I don't think that we could have picked a better person, to actually wrap up the Web Summit this year. Can we say see you at Web Summit next year, you think?
Definitely, they booked me when I was out of stage.
There we go. Claire,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Guys, this is a wrap from Web Summit 2022 with Claire Calmejane.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.